Today we're going to be creating this Moody blue hour look within Davinci Resolve. Now I am using the studio version, but you can do pretty much 99% of the things I'll be doing today with just the free version. The only thing I'm using that's studio exclusive would be noise reduction and the film grain plugin. You can get film grain elsewhere, but aside from that, it can pretty much be done within the free version or studio version, whichever you choose, but I do highly recommend the studio version. It is truly amazing. Now, to give some background behind this clip, it was shot pretty much after sunset. Well, we couldn't really see the sunset, but we were on top of a mountain and fog descended on the mountain, and it was just a very spooky, moody vibe. And when I was grading the clips, I had the idea to go for a more pushed, a really pushed blue hour vibe, and that's what I went with. So what you're seeing here on the screen is the log image straight out of my Canon R6, and I will say it does help to have something that was shot in a more dark environment, or a more, just a moody environment, if you know what I'm saying. This was actually shot in the rain. It was raining, it was foggy, it was kind of cold. It was late May, so it was warm, but it was cooler than usual because of the rain and the fact that we were on top of a big mountain. So having the color grade match the scene is a very important thing, and it's going to enhance the scene. That's what I want this grade to do. I want it to really create emotion and create a story within the scene. So we're going to take this log image from the Canon R6 from looking like this to something more like this. And it is a very pushed image, but it is the way I like to go in this sort of scenario. So let's get right into it. Let's go over into the color tab and check out this clip. So once you're in the color tab, start out by using Alt-S to create 7 nodes. Alright, once we have all the nodes laid out, we're going to click this one, 2 in from the end, and label it as color space transform. And I shot this clip in Canon Log 3 within the Canon Cinema gamut, so when I go into the effects tab and look for color space transform and drop it on there, I'm going to set my input color space to Canon Cinema gamut, the input gamma to Canon Log 3, and the output color space to Rec 709, and usually I set my output gamma to gamma 2.4, but we're actually going to use Cineon Film Log today because we're going to be utilizing a LUT, which is built into Davinci Resolve, so don't worry about having to get an external LUT. You're just going to go on to the next node, right click, go down to LUT, and select Film Looks, and go all the way down to Kodak 2383 Rec 709 D65. Now, this is a filmic color LUT, and I think it looks perfect for the scenario, but as you can see, it's a little too bright. I'm going to label this node as our LUT, and this is just going to give us the color we need for, and it looks okay, and it's getting us the color, but it's not getting us the entire look. So close the effects window, go over to the third node in, and now we're going to label it to be our base/balance. Now, this clip is pretty balanced to where I want it to be right now, so I'm not going to have to do too much balancing with the color wheels. However, if you do need to do balancing, you would probably adjust your white balance or use the offset wheel to just get the colors where you want it to be. And you want to be kind of neutral, but also leaning a little bit to the blue side. But the lookup table should get you most of the way there. It already, without the lookup table, it was kind of flat. Obviously it's log, converted to Cineon Film Log, and now it is a little bit more blue. So what we're going to do next here is go back over to the base node, and we're going to go into the HDR palette. And this is something that I find works wonders within the Canon Cinema gamut. As you can see, it's a pretty noisy image, and that's just the tendencies of Canon Log 3 and the R6. I think I accidentally left my ND on the camera here, so I had to jack my ISO to compensate. So it wasn't at the native ISO, but it doesn't matter. I am going to set up my HDR palette to recognize that it's using the Canon Cinema gamut, and we're going to darken the image. So in order to properly use the HDR palette, you have to go into these 3 dots here, go down to color space, and set it to whatever color space you're using. In this case, it's Canon Cinema gamut, and then my gamma is Canon Log 3. And now whenever I adjust the global exposure, it actually will adjust it the way it would adjust the camera's exposure. Now, if you're shooting 8-bit footage, this is going to be a breaking point. If you push it too far, you will absolutely lose control of the image, it will break apart and it will look really bad. If you're using 10-bit or higher, it's going to be fine, but if you are using 8-bit footage, you're just going to need to be careful with this. I'm going to lower the exposure just to the point where it looks natural, like it looks dark. And right around -2 stops, I'm starting to see that vibe of darkness. So I'm going to leave it, go a little too far and then kind of pull it back here. I think it looks good right around there, -1.79. This is going to vary depending on your shot, but I think this is actually really, really good. Look at how far it's taken us. We've gone from this to this. The LUT, without the LUT takes us most of the way there. So the LUT is giving us the color, the blue shift should already be there, and it's looking a lot like Blue Hour. Previously, there was a lot of noise in this image, but when I turn the exposure down, it's a lot less noticeable, and just to save time, I'm not going to put any noise reduction on this clip. If it was really prevalent, I would, but in this circumstance, I don't think it is an absolute must-have because I'm going to be adding grain anyways, and that's going to kind of overwrite it. If it's still bad afterwards, I will adjust, but I think it should be fine. So now we're going to move on to the glow node, and this, normally I really go ham on the glow, but for this, I'm not going to overdo it. If you want a full tutorial on how to use the glow node for creative purposes, definitely check out my other video on it. I'm using it a little bit differently today, but the general purpose is the same. It takes away the digital edge of the shot, and it's just going to make the roll off throughout the entire shot so much smoother. So I'm going to start by going down to the composite type and changing it to soft light. Then I'm going to take the shine threshold and pull it all the way down. And immediately we see a big change in the image. I'm also going to take the spread and take it almost all the way down. Not all the way down, because if you take it all the way down, it pretty much just looks like that. But I want a little bit of it so it softens the digital edge there, and that is looking nice. I really like that. So right there is good. I might pull back on the opacity a little bit, so I still have a little bit of contrast in there and a tad bit of sharpness. I don't want it to be totally soft, but I want to take off the digital edge, and it did that really well. So now it's just looking a whole lot more smooth throughout the entire image, and I really like that. So next is the adjustment, and I want the black levels in this image to be a lot more filmic. Real film wouldn't have, for the most part, true black levels. What I've noticed is it's always a little bit lifted and kind of hitting a certain color. It's not ever true black with no saturation. So I'm going to go to the node after the LUT and label it to be our adjustment. I'm going to just abbreviate it there. And we're going to go into this node and we're going to open up the custom curve. Now this custom curve, we have to be very gentle with it. From here I'm going to go and add default anchors. This will create a bunch of points across the entire curve. And from here we're going to select the bottom point and lift up the blacks a little bit. So as you can see in the waveform, it is lifting them up. I don't want to overdo it, but right about there seems good. Now I'm going to select just the red channel and then bring this back down. And boom. There you go. We have lifted blacks with a bit of a blue tint. By subtracting red from the shadows, we're introducing more blue, because the opposite of red is blue. And now we've gone from this to this with just a simple click. And if you did want to add a little bit more contrast into the image, we can go back into the glow and just turn up the opacity a little bit. And that'll add a little bit more contrast, or you can even adjust the spread a little bit. But I like it where it is right now. So I'm going to go to this second node in, and I'm going to search up film grain. Now this is what I put on pretty much every shot, especially my personal projects, because it just helps a lot. I actually have a whole video explaining why it actually helps with YouTube compression. You should use film grain to avoid YouTube compression. But I like the 16mm 500T preset, and I'm just going to adjust the texture a little bit. The grain strength, I like it right there, and it adds some texture and depth to the foggy area of the screen. So now we have that. I'm going to label that node to be grain. Now we're there.
I forgot something. One more thing you need to do under the base node is go onto the HDR palette and go to the light and just bring it down just ever so that the sky goes a little bit more blue. That's before and that's after.
At this point, we're pretty much done with the actual color grading. If we select everything and go step by step to see what we've done so far, we started with this log image. Now, flat, normal, what log looks like. Then we've converted it into City on Film log. Then we added a lookup table to give it more filmic color. Then from there, we brought the exposure down. We added in a little bit of glow. We adjusted the black levels and then added some grain. That's where we are now. And this is a pretty usable shot. I like it a lot, but I want to add a little bit of flair to it. Now, this is not something I would do with every single shot in every single project. This is a very tailored effect that you only pull out once in a while, and it's just to really enhance the vibe. Like, when you look at this, I feel like I'm lost in a forest, and I want to invoke that vibe, that you're just dizzy, that you're lost in this forest. So I'm going to go over to the effects and just click X, and it's one of these first filters up here, the Radial Blur filter, and I'm going to take it, drag it, and drop it onto the image. And I want to do it on the first node so it happens before the rest of the nodes. That's why I also put the grain before the rest of the nodes and the exposure adjustment before the rest of the nodes. And once you do that, it immediately is a very strong effect coming from the center, and it affects the entire image. Now I'm just going to label this to be Radial Blur real quick. But as you can see, it covers the entire image, and that's not something I'm particularly fond of. So I'm going to go over to the power windows and click on the circular power window. And now that constrains it to be within the circle, but I want it to be on the other side of the circle. So I'm going to go over to this button right here, which inverts the mask, and boom, it puts the radial blur on the outside of that. Now, if we just view it as is right now, it looks okay. I mean, it is certainly not perfect, so we want to go in and feather it out. You can see the area we're affecting if we click this button up here. So I'm just going to expand the softness up a bunch, and then I'm going to widen out the circle and just have it like that. So it's only affecting really the corners of the image. And then you can adjust the amount of blur to your liking. I like that. And you have a few different controls under the radial blur. You can have a realistic blur type or a stylized blur type, and personally I like the stylized. So it adds a lot of flair to the image, and you can go totally out of it. Like, this looks like you have like something on your lens. You could also darken the entire edge of the frame. That's a very push, like, oh, you're like hallucinating, your lens is dirty or something like that. I'm just gonna leave it as is like that, and then darken it a little bit to add like a bit of a vignette. But right there, that's the shot, and we're done. So we've gone from this to this in just 7 nodes. And from here, what I would do normally is just stabilize it and animate keyframes for if I'm going to scale in or whatnot. But from here, it's pretty much done. Now what I can do is apply this grade to other clips. There's a pretty substantial drop off of this cliff, but you can't really tell that because of the fog. So now if I open up the clips and I go right click on this one and apply the grade, you can see that it fits on this clip too, and it looks quite swell. And obviously I would stabilize this one, and I would adjust certain things like the exposure. And I think there's some weird banding that's going on because of the grain. I might tone it down a little bit, but it just really looks phenomenal. And this is another example here. This is a brighter example of Tristan walking through the forest, and it is a little bit pushed when I add it on, but it's not quite there because it's a brighter clip. But thankfully, with the HDR palette and 10-bit footage, I'm able to really pull this down. And There we go. We're getting into that dark area. But if you're finding that you're not getting that blue vibe to the clip, you can go over into your base/balance node and go into the regular primaries and go over to offset. And then you're just going to want to ever so slightly push some bluish green, teal-ish into the image. And you're going to be left with something like, that's a little bit too much green. So then we got there, and now we have this. So this is the result. And it's a very, I mean, it looks like he's, you know, hallucinating, walking through the forest, like he's dehydrated, or, you know, he's starving, something like that, and you're just having a bad dream. It's like a very unique vibe. So yeah, I mean, you could go even further with this. You can dial it in the way you want, but that's how you create the moody blue hour look within Davinci Resolve. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more color grading tutorials, I have a few on my channel and we'll be making more in the future. So definitely subscribe with notifications turned on if you want to see more, and if you like the video, you know what button to click. My name is Rocco. I really am thankful for you watching this video, especially to the end. I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.